Its arena in South Philadelphia still echo those three letters. In fact, those three letters still echo in arenas all over the world today. Those three letters and a crazy man named Sabu inspired me to become a fan again. Eventually, I ended up working for WCW, and my boss at the time probably wouldn't have wanted me to be here. In fact, it outright violated my six-figure contract. But I couldn't stay away. And it wasn't unusual to see other WCW employees here in the crowd. In fact, once I had to hide from a WCW vice president who sat down 3 rows away from me. And the people that were lucky enough to be part of it all were changed forever. They were part of a revolution. They changed the wrestling business. They became forever hardcore.
What hardcore wrestling is. Hardcore's whenever you go out there and you put 105% inside of those ring ropes. What ECW is ECW is a bunch of crazies, nuts, kooks, weirdos that all gather together, and a bunch of great people too.
I think it was a lot of guys busting their asses and that cared about what the hell that we were doing and cared about everything that being in that ring was a good product.
Our goal was just to be able to have a couple show, a show a month or a show a week, and try to make a little money.
We knew we had them, and we knew we had the internet marks. What I didn't know was how vehemently and how profoundly we had changed and altered the business in the United States at that time.
It had a profound influence on me, going from then on to when I went into the WWF and started working with Vince McMahon and Vince Russo.
They were hungry and they worked hard and they took risks that were unheard of in the wrestling business.
Well, one thing I was really impressed by was the energy level. And another thing I was impressed by was the reality of what was going on in the ring.
We were like a traveling freak show. And to me, what was special about it was that's how wrestling started, was on the Carney circuit.
It was an appropriate name, and it came at the right time, and he used, the best songs in rap and alternative and grunge, and, the characters were different. They looked like real people, not characters, really.
When we started the Attitude Era, that attitude came from ECW.
I've never, to this day, worked in a locker room like that one.
If it wasn't for those 2.5, 3 years that I was there wouldn't have been any career afterwards.
We didn't have to worry about Macho Man Randy Savage coming to ECW trying to take our spotlight, because they couldn't do what we did.
Back whenever we were working in front of Jim Thorpe fans, 50 or 75 of them, my checks cleared every week, and suddenly we're wrestling in front of 5,000 people and on pay-per-view to how many, God knows how many thousands more, and the checks start bouncing.
By the time we hit national TV and were exposed to a national audience, a lot of our best stars were gone to either WCW or WWF, and we came off looking like WWF light.
Never in my wildest dreams, as I said, did I ever think that this thing would turn into the whole phenomenon that it did. Our goal was just to be able to have a couple show, a show a month or a show a week, and try to make a little money, have a little fun.
You're not dealing with an ordinary flumpy. You're dealing with a funk. I've been in this damn profession for 35 years, and I've never backed down from anybody, and I don't have any intention of backing down from some damn stupid idiot moron bastard with a damn camera.
ECW was born out of the ashes of the old Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, which Todd Gordon was a part of. And when that went folded, Todd started up ECW.
Todd Gordon was the patriarch of ECW, and without him, there wouldn't have been an ECW.
He's the one that came up with the idea. He's the one that put the money in to start with, and a lot of times Todd Gordon's forgotten about.
Todd is God. Todd is God. Todd's a money man. He knows how to make money. and he just knows what to do.
And I told him, I said, Todd, this is going to break your ass, but I'm going to come up there. And he said, well, then it'll break my ass in. But anyhow, as I went up there, and that was it. That was the beginning.
It was his baby. It was his money. He was the one who, you know, like I said, I've heard he mortgaged his house to finance ECW.
Our first show we ever ran was at Mike Schmidt's Sports Bar in front of 80 people in a little bar. Never dreaming our wildest dreams that we'd go beyond wrestling in front of 80 to 100 people. I was approached by someone who asked me to do a TV pilot for a new sports channel that was going to start here in Philadelphia. We did the pilot at a little boys club up in the northeast section of Philadelphia. Wasn't a very good pilot, but they had no programming, and they said, we'll take it.
I was living in Atlantic City at the time, and we used to get ECW on the old sports channel Philadelphia. And that was my first exposure to it, and I was hooked from there.
And he said, Terry, he said, what I'd like to do is, he said, I'd like to try to put together a company and start wrestling up here. And I said, Todd, I said, I don't think it's a good idea. I think you're going to lose your ass.
Brought in Eddie Gilbert. He was adept at putting together a television show segment by segment. He did just that. I learned a lot from him, actually, and he helped put together the first 6 months or so of television.
I mean, the product was not good with Eddie Gilbert as booker. It wasn't a good product for Philadelphia, and it wasn't what the people wanted at the time. It was very Memphis. The talent wasn't good. It just wasn't a good product.
Eddie Gilbert called me and asked me to come in. I told him I'd come in and do the first shot for him, just one shot. And just to help him out, I had no idea. I'd never heard of Eastern Championship Wrestling. I had no idea what it was or who Todd Gordon was or anything else.
Paul was brought in by Eddie to help with interviews. He was, he would help the guys with their promos. He would interview them on the air. He was an on-air talent. And basically that was just it. He was Eddie's friend. He was an on-air talent. They ended up having a split. Eddie and I had a split. And Paul and I kind of hooked up from there, and he helped me out the first night when Eddie left.
It happened overnight. Paul came in, boom, here was Paul, and Eddie was gone.
When I heard Paul took over, to be honest, I was glad, but I didn't really know. I had no idea that they were going to carve the niche they did.
He was outstanding at it. His mind was, like, at that time, certainly back then, my gosh, he was so fast you couldn't even keep up with his mind. His own mouth couldn't keep up with his mind.
Paul got me an audition, and shortly thereafter, like a month later, Paul got the book, and the first change he made was to make me the play-by-play man.
Joey was a different kind of announcer. Nobody had really ever done what he did. I mean, he's the only person that I know that could single-handedly do an entire pay-per-view without a color commentator.
I had decided that I wanted to be a professional wrestling television announcer for my career, despite what my parents thought and my teachers thought and what pretty much all but one of my friends thought. That was my silly dream.
Right there, if not ahead of Gordon Soley. I mean, the guys that entertained me the most.
My 4 all-time best commentators were Ross, Gordon Soley, Lance Russell, and Joey Styles. I mean, put Joey in there considering really only, did 5-6 years in his career, and to be up there with the 3 legends, I mean, I think that's a pretty strong compliment.
I knew Paul Heyman since he was a teenager. He used to be a photographer. If you were shooting a picture, if I was taking a picture, I saw the picture that I wanted to take that shot of, and I got the camera up and I was ready to shoot. Elbow, psht, Paul Heyman. Me, George Napolitano, and this other photographer, Frank Amato, were plotting, and we were never able to do this, to get him banned from ringside.
I saw the brilliance in him, and I said, this is the guy I want to hang on to. He would really help me make this company grow.
He also kind of rubbed people the wrong way because he felt he had an understanding. And when you're working for somebody else and it's their vision, you have to do what they want. And Paul had a little trouble with that.
You never knew what he was going to do next, but it always worked. And the guys trusted that part of his mind.
Intelligence, borders insanity, and if I ever seen anybody that fits that description, it's Paul.
We bumped heads a couple times. I tell you, Paul, he around the car tonight a few times.
Yeah?
Yeah. There was a man at it. What'd you say? Get the knife.
I don't care what anybody said about Paul. Paul was one of the best motivators in the world. I mean, like Newt Rockney kind of motivator.
Paul's one of those guys that you can be mad at him and you want to punch him in the face or put a gun to his head, and you go and you're like, I'm going to kill him, and you 30 seconds after talking to him, you're like, God, he's the best. I love him.
An insane, crazy, Einstein type of moron.
You definitely could see that this was going to be the beginning of something special, and that Paul was bringing a special approach and a different approach to the product and to American wrestling. And you could also tell that every rule that's been written, he was determined to break.
So I didn't really see the significance of what was happening as it was happening, you know what I mean? But looking back on it, it was revolutionizing the business from your cartoon character to, let's say, your everyday guy that sits at the end of a bar, drinks a beer, loses a game of pool to you, and then wants to beat you over the head with a stick.
Paul was definitely making a statement when the very first match on Ultra Clash was Bad Breed against Public Enemy, and nobody knew who Public Enemy was. And they basically squashed Bad Breed that night, and they bloodied them, and it was definitely clear that, okay, these are the new guys, and these are the guys to pay attention to, and these are the guys that are going to change things.
Because I saw the blood and the violence and the interviews with the balloons with the wig on, and they called him Ric Flair, and I was thoroughly entertained, laughing with that, and then just fascinated by the violence and the gore that they did. So there was depth to the characters.
Rocco Rock, great friend. Johnny Grunge, great friend. Rocco, I wish you were still here with us, but you guys helped pave the way.
There was no Paul came in quietly and, eased into things. It was just, boom, I'm changing the product, I'm changing the scenery in the United States, and I'm changing all the rules. And that is exactly what happened at the very beginning. And a lot of that was Sabu. I think that Sabu does not get the credit, or he is just now beginning to get the credit that he deserves for being such a huge part of that change. I don't think that everything that Paul did or ECW's growth would have been nearly as successful without what Sabu did back then.
Sabu was like, boom, major cultural icon in the Indies almost immediately. It was almost like a complete revolutionary style of what is this guy doing.
He should have made millions in this business for being as innovative as he was, you know what I mean? And it's a shame he didn't.
I admire him, his commitment and his sacrifice to what he loves.
Greatest performer, greatest creator of new maneuvers that in the last 40 years in the wrestling profession. So many things that he created and started doing that he is the true innovator in professional wrestling.
This one day, this guy Dennis Corluzzo told me to call Todd Gordon. He was a sucker, and that I could get $500 from him. And so when I called him, I didn't have the guts to ask for $500. I asked for $300, and he said, "Yeah, you get $300. Come on in." It happened to be the same day Paul Lee was there. It wasn't Paul Lee brung me in, or someone had a master plan of bringing me into Pop's Town. We just happened to be in the same place at the same time. He actually said, "What are you doing here?" I go, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "Oh, okay, boom, boom, boom. You want to work with Taz?" I said, "No, but I will." I didn't know who Taz was. I never met Taz before that.
The original gimmick, which I believe Sabu hated, even though it was a fantastic gimmick, was Sabu was tied to the gurney and he had the Hannibal Lecter mask on.
The gurney thing was his idea. He was talking about it before I met him over the phone, and then when I came in, he goes, "You want to do that Hannibal Lecter thing?" And I laughed at him. And some guy came up to me and handed me these masks, Hannibal Lecter masks. And I started laughing. I said, "It's a fucking joke." So I threw them away, and he goes, "No, I want you to try it." I said, "No." So I thought you were joking. Over the phone, I was just agreeing with him because I wasn't faced with it, I thought I'd never be put in that situation. So I actually did it because Jim Crockett was there.
It was almost like a cartoonish gimmick, except for the fact that Sabu was so extreme, for lack of a better word, that there's no cartoon in it.
He goes, "I'll give you $500 if you just do it one time." So I did it, and it worked.
I remember the first time when they unchained Sabu, and Sabu just went, he didn't even go to the ring, he went straight into the crowd, started throwing chairs everywhere.
And then the next day he goes, "Do it again." I said, "No." He goes, "I'll give you $500, you do it one more time, never have to do it again." I said, "All right," so I did it again, and then it got to be where I couldn't go without it. Then I got mad, and then I stopped doing it.
Didn't like it?
It was too much work. It was too much acting. I'm not really that way. Unless there's a certain situation that makes me that way. I can't always be that way. Every time you see me, I'm wild. When do I rest? I mean, fuck.
Sabu was a huge innovator. I mean, nobody went through tables. Nobody did moonsaults. Nobody got fucking color like that. Nobody used their body as a human wrecking machine.
Usually, when my uncle got done with the match, he went around and scared other people, and I kept the people away from him. And he said, "Get back in the ring and get your heat." And I go, "How?" He goes, "Think of something." So I said, "How about I moonsault the table?" And he goes, "What's that?" And I go, "I'll show you."
And that's how it started.
Before he was using a table in his matches and stuff like that, he just, at the end of the match, he just went up on the top rope and started moonsaulting the table, and he didn't break it. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this guy doing to him?
Then when I didn't do it, people were disappointed, so I had to do it. And it was killing me every night. It killed me more when there was nobody on the table than when there was, you know, because my knees would crash to the table, and then if it didn't break, I kept doing it over and over until finally it broke. But I did that for years, before I even came to ECW.
In 1994, you did not see anything like Sabu at all in wrestling. So Sabu was kind of the lure to bring you into ECW.
When Sabu started doing all that stuff with the tables and stuff like that, that to me was the beginning of ECW hardcore.
You know, in 30 years, there's a certain number of matches that are memorable, really memorable matches to me. And one of them's the three-way dance. Sabu and Shane and I and Paulie, and a combination of the three of us that came up with the idea of the three-way dance. I wouldn't give that credit to, nor try to take credit for that.
I didn't go into the match, and I don't think they did either, saying, wow, we're going to really set the wrestling world on fire after this match. I think we just went out to do our job. We try to set the wrestling world on fire every night.
I think it was a great concept that was came up with, and we were trying to figure out some way to go in there and do something different.
It's an odd match, you know, because you got Terry Funk, who's like really old school, you know, and even though he can do, you know, moonsaults at his age and stuff, you know, and then you got Shane, who's a traditional type wrestler, and then you got Sabu, who's, you know, crazy out of the ring, in the ring. I mean, he just does crazy things.
I don't think anybody really knew what to expect, because at the time a three-way was unlike anything anybody had ever seen in the United States before.
The three of us talked about it, and we came up with that idea, and then went into the three-way dance, which was one of the classic ECW shows of all time.
Right before that three-way went on, I remember Paul kneeling on the ground almost like he was praying, which, if you know Paul Heyman, I don't think he's done a lot of praying in his life, and Todd Gordon going up to him and kind of patting him on the back, you know, going, hey Paul, what's the matter? And Paul just looking up at Todd and going, this match is either going to make me or break me.
I'm not really fond of giving credit to Shane, but they started that dadgum match and went about 15 minutes before I came to the ring, and believe me, they had the crowd right whenever I got there for that last 45 minutes of that match.
At roughly 15 minutes in, Sabu got hurt and got taken to the back.
Because the only one that really went 60 minutes was Shane. I didn't do 60 minutes.
So Terry Funk and Sabu basically did 40, 45 minutes each. I did the entire hour. So, which was by design. Paul wanted the franchise character to be a new world champion that could do the 1 hour, you know, Broadway.
It brought three different types of wrestling worlds together, you know. And a three-way is really hard to is really hard to pull off.
It was the creativity in the dance that began, and it was a wonderful dance.
What made that match special is it was the first time in forever in professional wrestling in the U.S. where you had a 1 hour match and they went bell to bell, and beyond that you had a guy, a veteran, Terry Funk, I don't want to say carrying, but helping to make new stars in Sabu and Shane Douglas.
It got out of control in every way, and the fans loved it. They really loved it. They really loved it.
You know, there was a subtle round of applause and the fans, and then, you know, as I'm laying there catching my breath, I started looking around, and Sherry Martel was the one that actually alerted me to it first. She went, oh my God. And I was lying here and she was standing there, so I looked at her like, I didn't know there was a fan jumping over the railing or what was going on. And I looked up at her, and then she said that, I started looking around, and that's when I realized the fans coming to this ovation.
When the match ended, I just stood up and gave a standing ovation and applauded for about 5 minutes. I was sitting right by the rail as the wrestlers came by. I high-fived them, and after the show, I would wait for my friend George, and I saw the wrestlers, hanging around the building, and I went up to each one of them and said, wow, that was one of the greatest matches I ever saw in my life. You guys, that was awesome.
That was the payoff. It certainly wasn't what Paulie handed us at the end of the night. The payoff was the fans. The payoff was the ECW group, their tightness. It was they also evolved that night. They evolved into a wonderful, wonderful cult and following. And we loved them as much as they loved us.
Do you want to see Hogan and Flair? Do you want to see the franchise Shane Douglas without the goddamn handcuffs, without the gag to say whatever the fuck I want to say?
One of the best promos ever.
He'll take it till he can't take it no more, and then he'll let you know, and then he'll get mad, be like, fuck you and fuck your mama and fuck this, that, and the other, and then later on be like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. He'll be like, well, fuck it, I done this all over, fuck it, it's done. You know what I'm saying? Shane sells tickets.
Hulk Hogan, you can't suck my dick. You can't hold the franchise's dark crap, because I am what this sport is about, and you are a caricature from the 1980s. You suck then, and you suck now.
When you look at the franchise character and you see Troy Martin, and people that have seen Troy Martin's temper blow know that that's real close down that scale of, you know, even-tempered and pissed off. That's Troy Martin pissed off times 10.
Shane is the man, in my opinion, who gave ECW their identity.
Shane was just an incredibly talented, just this great, young, good-looking babyface who just got fed up with the system, and it worked for him.
You know, my dad was an old World War II veteran, always taught me that, you know, you can always be like everybody else. It's easy to be mediocre. It's easy to be middle of the road. It's easy to be non-controversial. But all the successful people of the world, and he went through, you know, my dad used to talk to me about the scientists and the warriors and, you know, all the different people throughout history that made it. These were always people that took chances. Our good friend Mike Tenay called me up and had me on his radio program and said, "Had you heard what Dennis Corluzzo said about you?" At this point, I'd never met Dennis Corluzzo. I'd never heard of his name. I didn't know him from Adam. I had no idea who the guy was, except that I did know that he was associated with the NWA. And I had heard that he was telling people that they shouldn't book me. And at this time, remember, outside bookings for us were very important because the ECW was running maybe once a month at that point. And here was a guy that I had no dealings with, had no idea who he was. Suddenly he's going out and telling people on Tenay's radio show not to book me, that I'm unreliable, that I took pay from him and never showed up for him. I mean, it was really some pretty slanderous stuff he was saying about me. It was going to really have a negative effect on my bottom line. So when Paul Heyman took this idea that Corluzzo had about building this NWA out of ECW, Paul came up with the idea of using it as a swerve, what we call in the business a swerve. Build it to that point, let Dennis Corluzzo and the NWA think it's going to be their night, and all of a sudden the franchise pulls the rug out from underneath them and it's ECW's night. And I'll give Paul Heyman credit. Paul Heyman and I have a lot of differences over the way ECW finished out and the way he treated the guys, and you know, that's a whole other story. But I will say this, Paul Heyman, when it came to that point, you know, if you work for Vince McMahon, as you all know, Vince would say, "Shane, tonight you're going to do A, B, and C." And you either do it or you go home or get starved or something. Paul Heyman had called me for several weeks prior to this, and you know, every time he talked to me about it, he would go over what he thought were the positives, what he thought were the negatives. You know, any question I wanted to ask of him. The only two people that were aware that night of going into it that there was even a possibility that was going to happen were me and Paul Heyman.
For one, the NWA, for all intents and purposes at that point, was just a bunch of indie guys running around, and in many ways it is today, with the exception of TNA. It's a bunch of indie guys running around going, we're part of the NWA. You know, it's, with all due respect to them, they're indie guys. When you're drawing 60 to 75 people, you do not have any political stroke.
As I recall, I remember just how much it angered me that here's this guy coming in, "Hey buddy, sign this contract, but it's going to be great to have you on board as our champion, buddy." Meanwhile, 2 weeks prior to that, he's burying me on today's national radio program, telling everybody not to book me. And it just sickened me that that two-facedness of the business is something I've never liked, never been able to swallow it, will never like it. And there it was on display for me firsthand. And that's what really emboldened me to go ahead and go through with the idea of throwing that belt down.
Shane wins the NWA World Heavyweight title, and he dedicates it to his father who had passed away, which is, just awesome, and cuts one of his great promos.
Whenever I'm in the ring that night, I take the microphone and I stop, and there's a pause. You know, some people say it was like a dramatic pause. There wasn't. I was stopping and thinking to myself, do I do this or not? And when I look up to heaven and say, my dad had died right prior to that, in October of '93. And I looked up at heaven and I said, here we go, Dad, because that was me telling him this is the first time as a man I have the opportunity to put this into practice. And come hell or high water, whether it was for better or for worse, and that's when I take the belt and I stop and I do the long promo about the tradition of the Dusty Rhodes and the real Nature Boys, and then yes, the Ric Flairs and the Ricky Steamboats and yada yada yada. And that's where I pause and I stop and I look up and I say, here we go, Dad, and they can all kiss my ass. And I throw the belt down.
Now, when that NWA title belt hit the mat, it was like, holy shit! I just saw something that probably wasn't supposed to happen.
Holy shit, man. He just threw the belt down. That's going to be some heat.
It's a tremendous angle. And then he takes the ECW belt, the Eastern Championship Wrestling belt, and proclaims himself the ECW Heavyweight Champion of the world. And from there we became, I think that's when we became Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, and we created our own World Heavyweight title. The problem is the NWA didn't know about this. So the NWA was double-crossed. Dennis Coralluzzo and the NWA were up in arms.
When I did that, Coralluzzo was sitting at ringside, camera right, my left, and I see Coralluzzo look at Todd Gordon and looks back at me, and he still doesn't realize what's going on. And that was the beauty of it. Even as I'm cutting the promo, as I'm burying the NWA and hoisting up the ECW banner and the new name, and the fans are popping, everybody's jumping up and down, and Todd is sitting next to him, trying to convince him this is part of the show. Just relax and stay the course.
All I remember sitting next to this guy who was biting his finger and he was going, hey man, he's pissing on the belt. He's pissing on the belt. I said, oh no, don't worry, it's an angle, He goes, no man, he's pissing on the belt. I said, no, I don't think so. I said, just listen to him.
I kind of felt bad for Dennis because I knew Dennis, but at the same time, it was some interesting things going on that night.
I went in the back and he said, what are we going to do? I said, don't worry about it. I said, here's what you do. You threaten to suspend Eastern Championship Wrestling from the NWA if Shane doesn't defend the belt. And he has to defend that NWA belt or we're out. All along, we knew we were going to be out and we were going to start a company that had nothing to do with the NWA. We're now going to start Extreme Championship Wrestling.
But we actually got Dennis Coralluzzo that night to actually sit down and shoot promos about Shane. He's going to make me take that belt. He's the new NWA champion, and they're going to force it on me. And we actually got these vignettes from him.
Took 2 takes to his promo, left that night, Saturday night, and Tuesday when the show aired, when he found out, he got pumped.
I'm not a big fan of double-crossing people, so that, I don't think I would have done it. You know what I mean? I would have found a way to do it a different way.
And this actually, with him trashing the belt, brought even some more notoriety to the National Wrestling Alliance. What are these guys going to do?
I was kind of brought in, I grew up watching NWA, and that was the only belt I really recognized.
Anything controversial like that, it's a great angle because people were all up in arms and oh my God, I can't believe he threw the belt down.
It was definitely the right thing for business. Whether it was the right thing as karmically, it's a whole other matter.
You're going ahead and throwing down the belt and spitting on it and doing whatever that he did to it at that time. What's he spitting on? He's spitting on the heritage. He's spitting on what he loves. I mean, he's spitting on the NWA. So what? What is the NWA? I'll tell you what the NWA is. The NWA is a bunch of guys that were there before him that he should remember, that paid their dues and went ahead, and if you would look back and look at that heritage, well, you might find out there's a pretty bunch of good guys that handed you a profession that was in pretty good shape.
We felt it was something that had to be done, and it was done in a manner where people still talk and write questions and ask questions about that angle to this very day. Didn't know about it. When did they know about it? Who knew about it? Well, nobody knew about it. Just Paul and I, and then that night Shane.
As Paul explained it to me, he was so proud. He said it was a classic wrestling double cross. So you lied. And you screwed the whole organization. You call it whatever you want. I mean, that's, in court that's called perjury. And I'm not getting on Paul because a lot of people apparently do this. This goes on in wrestling, which I learned, I didn't like it so much. I don't think that's a good way to do business.
There's critics on both sides of the aisle. It was the greatest thing I ever did. It was the crappiest thing I ever did. But I honestly do believe that had we not done that night, that ECW would have been relegated to being known as an independent company, a tiny little thing, instead of this company that left this massive legacy that we're now seeing is bearing its fruit. And so, for better or for worse, I'm sure I pissed off a lot of people. For those I did, I apologize. But for the ECW fans that know why I did it, I make no apologies.
And we're trying to come up with a new name, and we're thinking about using the same letters. And Paul turned to me one day and he said, "You ever hear the word extreme?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've heard the word. Why?" He said, "Because in 2 years, you're going to hear it everywhere."
Now all the rage in extreme sports, here was extreme wrestling, so it was an appropriate name.
Trusted him, and it got extreme.
That was my style. That's what I wanted to do. So I was glad to see it go that way because I never saw myself as your Ricky Steamboat technical kind of wrestler guy.
It was tougher, and it looked more genuine. It looked more real than the other federations.
And I was getting booed. I was a babyface doing run-ins and getting heat. Not heat because you did something that they hated. Heat because you sucked.
Obviously, my relationship with Sandman was unique, so I guess seeing him evolve to a guy who came out smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, which Paul and I warred over until I finally won, because I said, it is still my money.
And Todd's like, listen, well, why didn't you just go out and let him be hacked? And Paul's like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it started out with a cigarette. He goes, let him go out with a cigarette. So for a couple months, I just came out with a cigarette. And then I would sit in the back, I'd have a 30-pack of beer, I'd be drinking beer, and then one day Todd got Paul to let me come out with a beer. And then the Sandman character was really hitting, you know what I mean?
You can relate to a man who walks to the ring drinking beer and smoking a cigarette.
He'd be one of the guys my uncle would like, who I wouldn't imagine my uncle would like, because he drinks and smokes. But see, that's him.
I think he's trying to pickle himself. I don't know. You could put him in a mason jar and he'll last for years.
Sandman is the prototypical functional drunk.
And you know what the interesting thing is? Tremendous family man. Like, a drunken menace to society on the weekends. During the week, he's like the greatest dad you ever saw. Doesn't drink, sits at home, with his kids. Just a phenomenal father. I mean, complete dichotomy.
Sandman is the first man that I've ever seen walk into any wrestling business and have absolutely not 1 ounce of wrestling ability, none, and get over like he does.
Now I love Hack to death, but there was a time that if I had a gun, I would have shot him between the eyes. And we always talk about it. Remember when we hated each other?
He'll give you the shirt off his back if he had to. If he needed it, he'd give it to you.
And he's one of the alumni of the ECW. And once again, I ain't got a bad word to say about him. Alcoholic, drug addict, but other than nothing.
I'm looking for something different to do. Nobody else comes through the crowd. You know what I mean? So I was just looking for something different to do. So I would come out from different places in the building. You know what I mean? Instead of everybody looking down the runway, I'd like to come in through the front door.
If you've never seen the Sandman entrance in ECW Arena, you're missing out on something really special.
When his music came on, that Enter Sandman by Metallica, the whole place came to its feet and this electricity came.
And then you just look at the sea of people all start to turn around. And it flows across the building. Everybody turns around to see, and then you stick your cane up and then the place explodes, It was a great feeling, Terry Funk again, kid, you gotta do something different to separate yourself.
Sandman is the drunken fans with a cigarette in their mouth, drinking and smoking cigarettes. Tommy's like the actual, is like the Mark fan that could never do it. And Sandman's the drunken guy who sits on his couch and goes, I could do that. Except they know they can't, but he's just a little tougher, a little more psychotic, and a little drunker, and he can do it. But I mean, those two really epitomize ECW.
Tommy Dreamer is one of the guys that wasn't really given enough credit for up there because he held things together a lot. Tommy dipped into his own wallet and tried to keep things going. He loved the business so much.
Tommy Dreamer, I'm just gonna, if this gets people mad at him, I'm sorry, but I love him. I admire a guy who did what he did to himself for something he loved.
Tommy is a really great guy. He's a true friend, and that's one thing you can't find in this wrestling business is a true friend.
I mean, he wanted so desperately to learn how to be a better wrestler. He wanted I remember at the beginning there when he first was being pushed there, and he just couldn't get over the way, the suspenders and all that, and he just couldn't get any traction with the fans. It wasn't until the Raven angle that the fans really bought into him, and he took that beating and just kept going back for more.
The feud that he had with Raven, of course, the ultimate underdog.
He actually wanted to die in the ring. He actually figured if he was going to ever die, like if he had ever got AIDS or something, that he would much rather die in the ring and have me kill him in the ring. you know, because it'd be much more, you know, dramatic, you know, ECW style.
Tommy and I, you know, we've been through a lot together, and he's good to work with, and very professional guy, and you know, he's got a good mind for the business.
Tommy was ECW. You know, everyone thinks Paul Heyman's ECW. To me, it was Paul Heyman and Tommy's ECW, especially towards the end once Todd left.
He was one of the reasons that ECW lasted as long as it did, and in the ring performer, he was great. And a lot of people didn't even know that, you know, and to this day, a lot of people have forgotten what a great in-ring performer Tommy Dreamer is. Just a great performer.
Cactus Jack is another guy. I don't think without him, ECW would have gotten as far as it did. And by the same token, I don't think Cactus would have made it to WWF without ECW.
Mick Foley was, and I don't want to be repetitive, but he's another guy who broke his back for those ECW fans.
Just a absolute wonderful mind on that boy.
His promos when he was doing the anti-hardcore stuff to this day, still the best stuff, the best promos ever, I think, in wrestling history. He would make you laugh, and he would make you go, well, this guy's out of his mind. You would actually believe he was nuts.
He always went one level higher than those fans thought that he could go.
A lot of the stuff he did with Mr. Sacco later, you would see some of that silliness with Mikey Whipwreck in the early days of ECW. You know, and some of the silliness that he would pull as Mankind. You got to see the beginnings of that as the anti-hardcore Cactus Jack.
I wish he wouldn't have retired though, but that's the way it goes. He'll come back.
He's a great guy, great personality, and no, I don't want to marry him.
These fans in Philadelphia really, really, really knew their stuff. So you really had to impress. And if you weren't any good, they wouldn't boo you because you're a bad guy. They would boo you out of the building.
The people were so fed up with the same boring rest hold. Everybody grab a chin lock and sit there for 20 minutes.
You know, the chants, you know, before ECW and the crowd and their chants, you never heard that in the crowds.
If someone messed up a move and they started the "you fucked up" chant, whatever it may have been, the fans were like as much a part of that show as anything.
You know, I would just look around, cover my ears, or stomp my feet, and they would do it more, and it became deafening, and it was always like, she's a crack whore, or she's got herpes, or it was all along the lines of the clapping, and they would just, every time I went out there, it would just be the same thing.
The ECW fans, you know, I mean, I had a great relationship with them. I really did, and I just loved them, and they knew I loved them.
Since ECW was like this cult TV show where everybody was watching, that's like where they were as known as the wrestlers because they had more TV time than anybody.
Rats would come from far and near. Bruh, they be on ice boats coming over the border in Alaska. They be, they be coming out of Africa with a bone in their nose. Oh, bruh, they come. I'm talking about midgets, blind people, everybody, all the rats. I love the rats in Philly. I got credit cards from these rats. I got my room paid for, even though it was already paid for. I would get advances from these rats, which I ain't never paid back to this day. I rent cars for months, and they call me tomorrow. Well, I rent a car. I be like, bitch, I don't know.
The fans are the most romanticized things in the history of ECW. Those fans were very, very demanding, and I mean, they were just assholes at times.
When people know your tricks, they stop buying tickets. Same as a magician. If I know his tricks, I'm not gonna watch him but once, maybe once.
But when they become part of it, they influence what it is. And I'm talking about the wrestling business or whatever they become part of. And I'm not sure that's always good because it changes the nature of what they liked in the beginning.
Everybody hated it because the fans were so smart that, you know, that they were like, fuck, these guys are dicks. These, you know, they're talking about the fans. These fans suck. They crap on everything. And so really, it's ironic that the building ended up becoming beloved, but at the time, most of the boys hated it.
They hated me at first. That's the funny part is they're vicious. They used to make these horrible signs about me and call me Poindexter. And somebody drew a sign about me and there was a jar of Vaseline. It wasn't very nice.
Mick Foley was the first to really act out on that with that whole heel turn that he did, where he was annoyed at the signs, you know, the Kane Dewey signs.
I'm like, you guys don't get it. Those are the best fans because they think they know so much. They're the easiest ones to con.
Showtime at the Apollo in Harlem, they've been known to boo comedians off the stage or boo people into tears. These are the kind of fans you have in Philadelphia in this building, so I'd never seen anything like it.
Damn, they were nuts. I can remember one time I looked out there and I just kind of went like that, and they knew what I wanted, and here came the chairs.
If you could just see it. And look at this, Terry's calling for chairs. Terry's calling for chairs. Don't throw the fucking chairs. Don't throw the... Oh, shit. Stop throwing the fucking chairs.
Finally, they said, Funk, do not ever raise your hands like that again and bring them in like that, because the chairs, we cannot have that anymore, because it got to where there'd be 500 chairs come flying into the ring all at once, and it was just that was great, and I don't think you're going to see that again.
I never told them, but they were my favorite fans. Yeah, because they knew, they didn't know. I mean, they appreciated a good effort, even if you didn't do that good. And they appreciated originality, even if you weren't that good. And they appreciated if you were good, but weren't that big.
They went along with the ride just as much as we rode it.
They should have a reunion, not even for the boys. It should be a rat reunion in Philly. It should be a top 10 question. And out of the top 10 questions, one of them would be, you could be a rat from ECW if you stayed at the Holiday Inn on Pecker Avenue. It'll be sold out from the first floor to the 10th, bro. 'Cause I mean, good God Almighty. We used to toss them around there like they were beach balls.
It was the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They knew what point of the movie to throw the popcorn. They knew what point of the movie to, it was just like that. It was an incredible experience. We played off of that, we fed off of it, they fed off of it. It was a synergy between us and the fans, and that's why I like to think we were the most fan-friendly promotion ever.
Oh my God, the goddamn the rest of it. I love you.
Taz, was one of the most over people I've ever seen. He was, those people, really believed he was the toughest guy in the world.
When you first meet Taz, he's not intimidating looking from a size standpoint, but his style of wrestling and the explosiveness in which the way he would throw his suplexes was so believable.
But Paulie and Taz convinced the world that he was the toughest motherfucker on the planet.
He's cool, good wrestler.
Taz ain't shit. Taz is a character. He got everybody food. He's tough. Taz is a fucking cartoon character. He's a t-shirt.
Very disciplined, very respectful, and I have tons of respect for Taz.
Taz lived his character a little bit too much, believed his own character a little bit too much.
First time I ever met Taz, he didn't really like me at all. We had a few words about my moneymaker. I gave it to me and Mikey Whipwreck were tag teaming one night in Staten Island, New York at the Sports Fest against his cousin Chris Chetty, who was brand new, straight out of the camp, and he had a tag team partner. We wrestled, I gave him the move, and the crowd just went ballistic shit, because that was the first time they had ever seen it. Taz was like pissed off, mad, thought that I could have hurt Chris, which, it's a possibility, but honestly, I've done that move for 15 years, and I've never hurt anybody ever with it. But, it looks devastating. He called it a tiger bomb. He said it was a fucked up tiger bomb, and I said, no, it's a pile driver. And he said, no, it's a fucking tiger bomb. I said, no, it's a fucking pile driver. He said, did you tell him you was going to do it? I was like, yes, I told him I was going to do it. And he called him over there just to make sure I told him, and then he really didn't have too much to say after that. But, I stood my ground, and he stood his ground, and luckily there was no, hands being thrown. I got reprimanded by Paul. Of course, I had every right to be, because Taz was the elder of the group, and apologized. Was water under the bridge, and we got along ever since.
Me and Taz we didn't get along either in ECW. Taz hated to laugh. Like, Taz was just not a manic depressive, he was just a depressive. Like, he was always depressed, always miserable. and I would like just make him laugh, and it would drive him insane. He hated laughing, and so I would tell these just horrible jokes, and he would start laughing, and he'd want to kill me for making him laugh. It was really bizarre.
And then when he got married, he finally loosened up a little.
The most violent matches in ECW were easily the Axel Rotten versus Ian Rotten matches. In fact, those matches paved the way for all the ultra-violent and hardcore stuff that you see nowadays.
That was probably the most extreme thing I'd ever seen. I mean, I've never seen anything like that, I think, at that point, honestly.
And there's never any real thought put into them or any kind of booking put into them. It was just more throw them out there, and if they want to put glass on their fist, you know, let them do it.
To me, it was a little too much, but I guess the crowd didn't think so because they were enjoying every single minute of it. And that's whenever I knew that times were changing a lot.
He really was a hell of a worker, so it was a shame that he never got to move past, you know, the whole hardcore thing.
Blood and Guts was always on the undercard, and it seemed like in '95, towards the summer, it kind of moved up to the main events. Raven and Dreamer were brawling in the main events. Mick Foley and Sandman were having barbed wire matches in the main events. Paul Heyman knew what he was doing because it helped make the company a lot of money.
He's like, Paulie wants you to call him right now, you know, you're gonna start with him. I'm like, all right, so I call Paulie up. You know, Paulie goes, I'll call you right back. You know, the usual, finally calls me back, lays out everything when I'm starting, the whole 9 yards, and then I hung up the phone. I'm like, I have no idea what he just told me. I was so, you know, drugged out the night before. I'm like, I have no idea. I didn't even know when I was starting. I'm like, well, I can't call back now. You know, it's like, hey, listen, I was pretty fucked up. I have no idea when I'm starting. So I'm driving all over town, and it's getting late. I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna get there. The show's gonna be over. Now I'm really fucked, right? I finally get to the building, you know, like 10:30, 11. But luckily their shows ran long. Paul's like, hey, what are you doing here? You're not starting until next week. I'm like, oh, I start next week. That's when it is. And I'm like, I just thought I'd come hang out. You know what I mean? So he's like, cool, whatever. Yeah. So I remember that, but then after that, I don't remember the first starting date.
Raven at that time in that niche, I think kind of redefined what a wrestler could be because he was so different.
Raven has been known to be a little artistic in his thoughts.
You look out into our audience and you see people just like, you know what I mean? People can relate to his character.
He's pretty smart. When it comes to the business, I think he comes up with really good ideas.
Great mind, great wrestler. Cool guy, super cool.
What a complex individual. Never know what kind of mood Raven's going to be in.
Real intelligent, but can be a moron at the same time, and half the time maybe a little bit too smart for his own good.
Raven and I were just always the type, it was just, hi, how you doing, and that was pretty much it.
You know, I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way back then. I mean, I did for years. I mean, not just back then.
Raven has been around for a long time. Raven plays the game.
He's what a heel from 1965 in the wrestling business would look like today.
Everybody who's a producer or a booker has a character to identify with. Like Vince McMahon, he saw himself as the $1 Million Man. He also saw himself as when Lex Luger's USA character. That's who he saw himself as. And Paulie saw himself through Raven's eyes, and so it just, I mean, it clicked. You know, I've always used this analogy. I mean, not that I'm a De Niro, well, he is a Scorsese, but I'm not that I'm a De Niro. But I don't think he's ever had anybody, and I've never had anybody that we've worked with that had more symbiotic relationship together.
Scott used to come into the locker room with, he'd have a napkin from the Waffle House in this back pocket. He'd have toilet paper in this back pocket with stuff written on. He would come in with just stuff, pulling stuff. He'd say, oh, what's this? All these ideas and stuff that he's got in his head, you know what I mean?
Raven doesn't get enough credit for the changes that he made in the product, because when Raven came in, I guess he got in Paul's ear, or he took more of a part of it, or maybe Paul was just evolving the product at that point, and that's when the pacing of the shows really started happening.
I walked into the dressing room and they were Raven was holding a class, and he had the whole dressing room in there, the young little Guido, the young Danny Dorian, the young Roadkill, all of them back in the day were watching old UWF tapes.
Who are the great performers in the world? You know, I tend to believe that it's guys like, you know, I want to believe it's us guys that have beaten their bodies up all of this time and everything else, or is it the guys that have like Raven and Hulk Hogan and Dusty Rhodes that have managed to just make a living by really just by doing the least amount they can. So I think that they're probably a whole lot better than what we are. You know? I think we're the dumbasses and they're extremely smart.
He called me and he asked me about Ray and Psychosis, and I said, with all due respect to the other wrestlers in your company, they will blow away anything you have, you know, when you bring them in. So he brought him in, and anybody that knows Paulie knows he very rarely answers his phone. Well, he was waiting for my call because I told him I was going to call him to find out how the match went. He was like, tremendous, bring him back next week, every week, you know, and can I have more? And that's when, you know, we brought in La Parca and Juventud, and, you know, when I first started there, I was doing Lucha Libre still. So I told him, why don't you take Crazy? And Crazy went down the ECW and just became an instant phenomenon.
Well, of course, in the early days of ECW, that was probably one of the first, I would say probably one of the first times that like Psychosis and Juventud had a lot of TV exposure in the States. Super Crazy is one of the best Mexican wrestlers in the world.
I think he always gave 100%, much like Sabu, and his style was just, it was Mexican. It was everything they wanted to see: dives, backflips, cool spots. He epitomized everything they wanted to see in a luchador, and I think the greatest compliment was when he would go to the corner and all the fans would count to 10 in Spanish.
They got more exposure. I think it had a lot of influence on a lot of the guys.
They were having their match, and during the course of the match, Mick wrapped a chair right where I'm sitting right now. Mick wrapped a chair in a t-shirt, and I guess it had some lighter fluid on it. He lit it.
Here was the idiocy of all of us, because when they put the towel, you know, and they set it on fire, they used tape to hold it there. Well, of course, the tape's gonna burn too. So of course the tape burns, the towel falls off.
Cactus had the chair, and it got hot. He dropped it. He picked it up and he goes to throw it towards Terry Funk, who had just gotten out of the ring, and by now the tape had melted, so the flaming towel that was on top of the chair, when he threw the chair in that direction, became a frisbee and started, you know, flipping around and literally flew out of the ring and landed on Terry Funk's back and bounced into the front row.
Mick automatically jumped on top of Terry to put him out.
I thought that was great stuff. I mean, that's some good shit right there, you know what I mean? Cactus literally on fire. I mean, how much more extreme can you get than that?
The first reaction, a lot of the fans were like, "Who concert?" Because people were running for the doors. It was almost like a riot atmosphere.
I had friends come from my job at News Corp who had to see this ECW thing, and they were evacuated with the rest of us.
I thought it was perfect. I mean, Cactus didn't have a problem with it. You didn't see Terry Funk come out here and apologize afterwards, did you?
Me and Dreamer had this great angle. When the lights go out, we go up to the crow's nest, and I got him crucified. Except by now the place is, you know, filled with smoke. People are stampeding out. So not only am I not remembered for being in the angle, but nobody never got to do our big angle. Our angle at the end, no one saw. The footage stunk of it. So there's only like one shot that Paulie ever kept, just Paul, you know, Dreamer handcuffed, you know, crucified up on the crow's nest.
I was so embarrassed going back to work that Monday that I had actually invited people who came down from New York who had to see this. And it was just, we had this bloody guy hanging half dead from the rafters with girls like crying and screaming and running out. And then we got evacuated because people were getting asphyxiated with this horrible smell. It was humiliating. It was awful. It was just so awful. So awful.
I actually thought it was the death of the company that night. Next month, everybody came back. Paul apologized to the ring and said we would never use fire at ECW again, which probably lasted for 5 years.
That little building on the corner of Swanson and Rittner Streets in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I was born near the building. I lived near the building.
It was the Madison Square Garden of ECW.
The one thing that I remember mostly about that building was the electricity.
You couldn't even fit people into that building, and it was like 100 degrees, and we'd be sitting in the front row with shirts dripping of sweat, and the smell of it, and going into that bathroom and piss all over the floor. It was absolutely disgusting, but I would never miss a show.
I sat right in the front row. You can watch a lot of those old all those tapes where I was in the front row, and then I graduated to being a bleacher bum.
The only memory I could have from this night is in this building is when I broke my neck. I was just getting over surgery because I had tore my bicep tendon. I had that repaired, and I was doing a run-in on that, and he hit me with a move that was supposed to not land me where I landed, put it that way.
Shane, you know, gave Gary the DDT And I don't know if Gary took it wrong or.
What happened was I didn't realize it, but it broke my neck. And Shane did it.
250 pounds of my weight is snapping your body down and at an awkward angle. So you have to pancake flat to protect yourself. And I kept telling him that all day long, and he kept telling me, no, I'm gonna make it look really good. And I said, no, Gary, I'm telling you, pancake flat on this thing. So not only did he try to take it like a DDT, but he took it directly on the belt. He directed himself to the belt whenever I dropped. So the belt was lying there. He dropped himself on his head, down on the top of his head.
Shane would say that it was you.
Well, he could say it's me all he wants if that's going to make him feel any better.
I mean, it turned into a great angle, but I didn't want Gary's neck to be broken because of it, but that was all 100% shoot.
Now we get to the back, and this is amazing. I mean, Gary, you're a lucky dude to be walking around right now, not in a wheelchair, because we get to the back, and he's going, man, I got to crack my neck. I got a kink in my neck, and I can't get it. And he's pushing himself and trying to snap his neck, crack his neck, and he can't.
Before you know it, I found myself in the hospital, strapped to a bed, and they're telling me my neck is broke. My C1 vertebrae was broken in half.
Todd Gordon called me and said, did you hear about Gary? I said, no. He goes, he's at the hospital right now. You broke his neck. Get the fuck out of here. He goes, I'm telling you, he's at the hospital right now. He's getting one of those haters. I said, you're not getting me on this. I mean, I've seen him in the back crack his neck and jerk himself all around him. There's no possible way. And so when I found out he had really broken his neck, obviously I felt terrible because, the one thing you don't want is anytime you're in the ring, if you're serious about this business, and most of us are, you don't want to see anybody walk away with that kind of an injury. And I mean, that could be really, really serious in the long run.
So they had to drill a halo on me, and I had to wear a halo for 6 weeks. And instead of me staying in the house, I figured, I'm a company man. So I was able to work and cut my promos and still talk, to the guys and I guess to the fans and let them know what happened.
Paulie had Shane and I do jokes about, Jerry's kids and all this kind of stuff, and I was so against it. So mainly, I'm saying these jokes and my heart's breaking because I hated doing it.
I was always amazed that every week when we get there to shoot the vignettes, that Paul would have something, me swimming out of the lake making fun of a crippled person, or me sitting in a wheelchair out in front of a hospital, or all these talking about Jerry's kids and everything else. I was always amazed that Paul could top his tasteless joke from last week with something even more tasteless.
I actually came in the ring to try to stop Shane, which was kind of stupid on my part because I was in a halo. And he grabbed the halo, threw me to the ground. And then that's when all my shit hit the fan, man.
And the place goes nuts and people jump the rail.
I remember the gasp in the building that night, and I mean, now it's a shoot. People were shocked that Shane was doing that.
I ended up taking me away in the ambulance. People jumped the guardrails. I know Shane took off out the back door because he didn't know what was going on.
I got spit on, somebody punched me, somebody hit Shane.
So when I get to the car and I'm trying to get out of there and there's fans all around me punching me and kicking me, I can't get the door open.
And the doors are locked and we can't get in the car. And I remember Dreamer running after us, and it was just crazy.
And for some reason, it popped in my head what Terry Funk had said about the night he had gotten stabbed years and years ago. He said, you won't know it until later if you're stabbed or not. So I paused, and I'm sitting in the car, and we're driving down away from the building, we're safe now, and I stop and I start feeling myself to see if there's any knives sticking in or any blood any place.
People were crazy. People jumped the rail, and that's how much heat we had for that angle because Gary was loved, and nobody liked us. My God, he broke his neck.
I do remember that the angle was incredible, and that was definitely the hottest Shane ever was as a heel.
For 2 or 3 months after that, we had to be snuck into the building through the backs or through the kitchens in certain buildings, in the trunks of cars.
It definitely propelled Shane's career because it made him the #1 heel around at the time.
I've always heard the term white heat in the business, and you think, well, everybody's so smart to the business today, it's so overexposed, you can't have white heat anymore. We had white heat on the Gary Wolf broken neck angle.
Shit like that just doesn't happen. I mean, it was either it happened or it didn't happen. I mean, I can't say it was accidental. May have been, may have not been.
Well, to this day, Gary still says I broke his neck. And I beg to differ. I say he broke his neck.
Yeah, the boys hung their jackets on my head.
That's what makes it even more compelling, is that these fans that were so smart bought into it such hook, line, and sinker because of all the tasteless stuff that we had said, and the fact they knew that Gary's neck was legitimately broken, and all those factors playing together. That's the beauty of the whole thing. That's why when everybody tells me they're a smart mark, I say, yeah, but the key word there is still you're a mark.
I would say Shane at that time period and the Dudleys in '98 were the hottest heels that ECW ever had.
The Dudleys were another Raven gimmick. I came up with that one night in Tampa at the fairgrounds. Me and Dean were screwing around Malenko, and I'm like, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm putting on the foil, coach, every game, like in Slapshot." And so I came up with the idea we need Hanson brothers all wear the glasses and all, bunch of meat, jarheads, not jarheads, but really, meathead types.
As heels, I mean, they would cause riots in the building. They just had it.
Probably the most famous tag team ever in ECW.
They can rile somebody up like no other person could.
Were always cool with me, and I'm glad, because I'd hate to be on their bad side.
Bubba and Devon ain't shit. Never have been, never will be.
Good guys. I don't know, they said they invented the table, so I guess I got heat with them.
Those guys, really did a lot for that company. I mean, they did lots of advertising, and they did promoting, and ring stuff, loading, unloading.
Great guys, love working with them. All the power to them, because they made a huge, when they left here, they made a huge impact, and they left here on the circumstances that were right for them.
There was a big storyline that they were getting ready to film that they had to get in.
The ring broke, or some snafu that they needed to kill time.
I believe it was Tommy Dreamer that came up with the idea to let Kimona do what she probably does best, and that's entertain the crowd. I remember they cleared everybody off the stage. They got everybody positioned, and
so what are we gonna do to kill time? We just send her up there to go dance, entertain the people. But then they played it up on the she had Kimona the night she danced atop the ECW arena.
Yeah, I saw it on the internet.
We did a lot of stuff. I mean, I always said there was two things I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do any lesbian stuff, because that's not my deal, and I'm not gonna get naked. And well, I got naked by accident, but our demographic was 18 to 35-year-old males. Of course we're gonna do something like that, and always wear the little skirt so it can pop up, and or if you didn't have a skirt on, my favorite was you pull them in for, like you're gonna give them a pile driver, and you stick the hand down and you pull up the thong, and you do the spanking. I mean, we always incorporated sex into everything, because sex sells. So my first night in ECW, working in front of a live crowd, I meet Paul Heyman. I take a chokeslam from 911, and I get hooked. Paul, he always thought of Shane as like the captain of the football team, like the star quarterback, so he made me his head cheerleader. So I know that's where that name came from. The Queen of Extreme, I'm assuming Paul made that up.
She came across as a girl that would as I say, it put out.
My whole thing throughout my whole career was, well, you lose the belt, you lose me. My legs are going to be shut if you lose that belt.
I mean, I remember one time Perry Saturn coming up to me with Taz and saying that I was a hypocrite. And I said, why am I a hypocrite? And he said, I always talk about in interviews and in front of the boys about how much you love your wife, and yet you do what you do with Francine. I said, well, what do I do with Francine?
If you can fool the boys, then you're definitely going to fool the fans. And I mean, Shane and I, he was like my big brother. We did a lot of things together, but we were never together.
Paul always wanted us to play it to even the boys in the dressing room that we were screwing around, so that if it did, that it wouldn't leak out on the internet that it was just just a storyline or whatever.
We were seen in public together, Tommy and I, and he says you broke kayfabe, blah 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 blah. And I turned around and I was just like, well, it's life outside of wrestling, but there, we were in a building where fans were, so I guess Tommy and I were out of place by being together when Shane was there too. But he got mad at me for that, and him and Tommy kind of had words, and it just became, and Paul got involved. It just became ridiculous.
So I went to Paul and I said, Francine thinks that she should be put with Tommy, and if you want to do that, I'm cool with that. And he went off, not mad at me, but he went off telling me I've already told her no, and it pissed me off because again, she'd already been told no and asked me to go do her dirty work. She was trying to set me up.
After that, he didn't talk to me and there was like a 4-month period where we were working together, but we really weren't working together because I was doing nothing at ringside.
She kept whining and complaining about it, and and then finally, the one night I went to the ring, we were in Philadelphia. And I went to the ring and I held the ropes open for her. The entrance where I hold the ropes open for her, she would turn, give me the kiss, I'd beat my chest and give her the cock of the walk, give her center stage. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any other world champion that ever gave his valet center stage over his entrance. I did that because I thought it was the right thing to do. And that particular night, she turned around and looked at me, instead of kissing me, the hard camera was directly behind me. So I held the ropes open for her, she came up and she turned like she was gonna kiss. She came about that close to my face. So on camera, it looks as though she's kissing me. And she goes, "I hate your fucking guts, you motherfucker." And she turned and walked away from me.
I would never disrespect somebody. I never said that.
When we got to the dressing room that night, I told her in no uncertain terms what I thought of her. And I told her to her as brutally direct and as frank as I could. And if she thought I wanted to punt, it wasn't that I was saying. I was calling her a...
I haven't talked to him in about, good Lord, probably since '99.
It is what it is, and she did what she did, and my conscience is clear.
I'm pretty sure it was Scotty's idea. You gotta understand, me and Scotty been doing a promo. We've been doing an angle here for, we might have been a year into it, a year and a half into this. So Scotty knew we had to step it up a notch.
I just went to rehab. I was having a breakdown. And of course, Anthony the Pitbull was convinced that I only went to rehab so I wouldn't have to drop the belt, even though I wasn't supposed to drop it for like another year. But as I had a breakdown, Sandman drove me to rehab, which was really beneficial because I was there for 10 days. The day I got out, I immediately went to the pill doctor, got some pills, and went to the store and got a 12-pack. And then I had to go shoot promos in New York, so Sandman and his wife, Sandman didn't feel like driving, so his wife and me drove up to cut promos up in New York. So it lasted, my rehab lasted all of 10 days, and but at least it got me out of my breakdown though. So anyway, I knew I had to come back with to the arena with some impact. So I was like, I'll crucify the Sandman. He's a carpenter. He can build it. So I'm not going to build it.
I obviously had no qualms with doing it. So I built the cross, had it stuffed under the ring.
Kurt Angle was there because I was the guy that made contact with him through Mark Madden. His main concern was that we didn't do anything that came off as so outlandish or anything that involved him, because he didn't want his character to be wrapped up in any kind of controversy.
Like, here's the thing, is if we have it in the ring, people are going to see the play develop. They're going to see a cross. They're going to see what's coming. I don't like anybody to know what's happening until it happens. So I had it under the ring on the near camera side, and I had me, Meanie, Nova, and everybody circled around so nobody could see what we were doing. Our bodies were covering it, and we strapped the Sandman to it, and then all of a sudden we hoisted it in one big motion, and there he is.
80% of this country is Christian. It's the religion that changed the world. Probably not the best choice.
It's like, whoa, that's awesome, this is heavy. And then going into the locker room and just everyone's yelling and screaming and Francine's raising hell.
I did not like that angle.
I remember fans being mad. I remember standing there and walking around the building and people were just angry. And I'd never ever seen that. And it wasn't even heel heat angry where I want to see this bad guy get killed. It was how dare they do this?
The people, it was the right kind of heat. The people were like, this is heavy, And they were just like that quiet, the quiet Japanese heat.
Yeah, I was there. That was that didn't get over at all.
Kurt Angle, who I guess is also a Christian, who was standing next to me, started screaming at me. And I'm screaming back, I don't know, I didn't book this thing.
So I turn the corner to the back and I look up and I see Kurt Angle coming down and he's throwing his hat and he's going, this is bullshit, this is bullshit. I was very specific that this kind of stuff was not supposed to happen. And again, I have no idea what's going on, so I go look at the monitor and I see this crucifix and this just insanely ridiculous angle that Raven and Sandman had conjured up themselves had never gotten cleared by Paul, or so Paul says.
I knew, Sandman knew, Stevie knew, the Meanie knew, Nova knew, Paulie knew. You know, well, maybe Paulie didn't know.
So nobody knew what we were going to do. Obviously, Shane didn't. We get back. There's a big stink about it, and they wanted us to go, but they wanted us. Paulie said something stupid like, They wanted us to fight back out or do something like that, which I thought was totally ridiculous. I was like, no, he just killed me, left me hanging on a damn cross. So I'm supposed to be, you know, I can't rise from the dead yet. It's not Easter.
Taz was legitimately high, and all these people were like, oh yeah, because you're Jewish and Todd's Jewish and Paulie's Jewish. Why didn't you crucify him on a Jewish star? I'm like, oh yeah, that'll have a lot of impact. I put him on a Jewish star, it'll roll away.
When I saw it, I exploded. And we immediately went into damage control.
And then Paulie makes me go back out and apologize, which to me was the stupidest thing you could do, but he was trying, I mean, honestly, the only reason Paulie did it was because he was trying to woo Kurt.
So then they talked, they got Scotty to go out and apologize afterwards, which I thought was a crock of shit. Which the one thing that really pissed me off, that we had worked to this point to get to this angle. And then, and then he's gonna come out and apologize afterwards. I mean, Raven apologizing. I mean, come on, he could kick my son and he could knock my son over. My son could be on the way to the hospital. Raven wouldn't apologize to me, be like, ah, my bad.
Let's say hypothetically we did go over the line, which we didn't, because it was the right kind of heat, because I was in the center of it, so I could tell. But let's say we went too far. The last thing your fans want, if you're the Rebels, is to say, oh, I'm sorry. You know, hey, if you go too far, then hey, we went too far. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is.
If it was maybe 2-3 more years later in my career, I never would have let him come out here. I would have said, no fucking way was that going to happen.
The people were really disappointed in the apology, which I made as insincere as possible. You know, Paulie said, make sure it's sincere, so I tried to be sincerely insincere, and I think I accomplished that. I was like, listen, I'm really sorry about that. And then I powdered.
That's the only time that I really thought that there's edgy in there. It's just.
Next thing you know, Kurt Angle's hired in WWE. You think he told Vince McMahon when The Undertaker hung Steve Austin on a cross a couple months later? You think he told Vince McMahon to go tell him to apologize? That's my take on that angle, Kurt.
Let's leave God out of our business. Let's give him a break. I mean, we don't want to get him into our business, do we? No.
I said, Mustafa, I'm the gangsters. New Jack is the gangsters. I could dress my mom up to play you. I don't need you. So just get paid, act stupid, and be happy. Once Mustafa was gone, New Jack took off.
I like New Jack. New Jack was just a great character. I mean, just this militant black guy, just you know, he was so charismatic. I mean, wasn't the greatest worker, but he knew that, and he didn't care. He didn't need to be. He knew that all he needed to come out with a noose, with a fork hanging off it, and beat somebody up.
One of the most dangerous men in the business. You know, there's a code between the guys to take care of each other, and when they're in the ring. And New Jack knows about that code, but it's not many times that he abides by that code.
That guy's lost his fucking mind.
New Jack, great guy. Well, you know, we've had our problems, but New Jack's another one of those guys that marches to the beat of his own drum.
And if you notice, there's no shit around my face, no flies. You don't see no flies. Meaning I ain't kissed nobody's ass to get where I am. You know what I'm saying? Never have, never will. So it's all good. I ain't mad at y'all.
I was there, and that was some mean shit, actually.
The interesting thing about Mass Transit was nobody in the locker room knew he was a wrestler until there was like a lineup sheet, and we saw the words Mass Transit, and we're like, who the fuck is Mass Transit?
Axel Rotten didn't show up. Something happened with his grandmother. So Devon didn't have a partner. Devon Dudley didn't have a partner. And this kid comes up with a tape saying that he's worked before, yada, yada, yada. He's a big boy, so he's like, well, you can take his place. So your job is gonna be just getting there, you know, you're just gonna be the piece of meat. You're gonna beat the shit out you. He's like, okay, no problem. But then he came back and he started telling me about all these different spots he wanted to do.
Mass Transit was a young guy. I think he was just excited. He had his family there and he wanted to get some spots in.
And he's sitting there next to Taz, lighting up his cigarette, telling Paulie who he's going to be in the ring. And he's telling the Gangsters and Devon Dudley what they're going to do in their match. No, you sit there, you shut up, you listen, and, you know, hopefully, you know, you get invited back.
But then he came back and he started telling me about all these different spots he wanted to do. Then he said he wanted to get color, but he didn't know how to do it. He asked me would I do it. And I said, yeah, I'll do it, gladly. So when it came for the time, when the time came for him to get color, I cut the shit out of him. Now he didn't say this long or this long. He just said he wanted to bleed, so I cut him.
When he took it, he put his head down to sell it, and he's like, oh. But when he looks up, he looks back down and realizes there's a puddle of blood this big. And the first thing he does is he looks down and then he grabs his head and then he does this a couple of times. And I mean, it wasn't funny, but it just kind of struck us as funny because when he looks down and he sees the blood and realizes how bad he's cut, he screamed like, you know, like a little girl. I mean, it looked like somebody kicked him in the balls real hard. You know, he had nothing but that high falsetto going on.
You can see his skull. You know how your skulls are like mended together? You can see it. I cut that boy deep. I cut the shit out of him. I had like a surgical scalpel. Everybody said it was like an X-Acto knife, whatever the hell it is. I had a surgical scalpel and I had on a piece of wood and I just cut him real hard, like whoosh. And he bled. A lot.
It was odd because whenever they got back to the dressing room, New Jack had to scram. The cops were pissed, and they were the ones that were actually pressing charges.
I mean, as over the line as New Jack went, I mean, part of it, you know, could have been justified.
Any regrets about that whole incident?
No, I regret it. He had no business being in the ring. I mean, fuck. I mean, they told me he was 20, and I found out he was 17. That was not my fault. Do I regret it? No, I don't regret it. Welcome to the business.
Rolling out the door, the kid like grabs the door. He was dead, but then he comes alive, you know, and he grabs the door as he's rolling. No, Dad, I'm one of the boys. You know, and then they reel him out. We don't do that. You know, I was like, okay.
Then 9 months later, I was in court for aggravated assault, mayhem, aggravated assault with intent. They charged me with the same thing. It was worded 5 different ways, but it all meant the same thing. And they offered me 5 years and went to jury trial, and I got acquitted. Free like OJ, did it and got away with it. So that was that, bro.
And I was doing various independent dates in the Northeast. And I was always running into Raven and Stevie Richards. And one day Raven talked to me and said, hey kid, you know, we got an idea for Stevie, and it's a real big fat guy that dresses like Stevie. The guy we have in mind, you know, he can't really bump. But, you know, you kind of fit the description, and you can bump. You do a good moonsault. Want the job? I said, yes, I do. Yeah, yes, I do, and I'll wear the Daisy Dukes of Pride.
I used to make them impersonate tag team favorites of mine. Like I made Stevie dress up like Baron von Raschke with a bald wig, and you know, the meanie be Colonel Domini, and Stevie's walking around with the claw going, do not worry, meanie, I will not hurt you. And just preposterous stuff, just to entertain me.
And, I was talking to Al Snow. I was like, yeah, we should come out, you know, instead of the New World Order, we'll be the Blue World Order. You know, he started cracking up and we're thinking of ideas. So the Blue World Order went from being a one-night deal to being a 9-month, you know, run. The locker room was such a tight-knit family that even the way I left and I came back a totally different person, you know, with the gangbang queen on my arm. I mean, they welcome me back with open arms. To this day, people still tell me, you know, walk up to me on the street and, you know, scream BWO, 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 when you bring them back to BWO.
I was there the night they did the ECW invasion at the Manhattan Center, and it was the first time I was at the building. And it was really cool, actually. I mean, just the setup of the building. And I sat up on the second tier with Vince Russo, and we actually watched the entire show from the second tier.
90% of the fans at the Manhattan Center that night for Raw were ECW fans.
I remember sitting down and talking to Tommy Dreamer, you know, how nice these guys were and how much they loved the business and how much they were killing themselves to succeed, whereas we were in the middle of a war with WCW. And I mean, everybody was concerned about contracts and who was going to jump in if we were going to survive. And here you have a group that everybody loved what they were doing, and you can tell by seeing everybody backstage there that night.
We were going to the catering. We get there, and we get the run around of where we're supposed to dress up in the locker room. And, Taz is already like, they're ribbing us already, brother. They're ribbing us already.
Top talent really saw us featuring them on our show as a complete waste when we were getting our asses handed to us by WCW.
Yes, I was the one that, I was pretty much the head writer.
And would you say that you borrowed ideas ever from ECW?
I did later on, like when the Big Show went up to WWE and he choke slammed The Undertaker and the ring broke. I stole that from Paul E. and the Bam Bam Bigelow Taz angle. I just said to Vince McMahon, if we're going to get the Big Show over, and Undertaker's a big star, if he choke slams Big Show choke slams Undertaker and the ring gives, I mean that's a pretty good out on a show, and it leaves an impression of people going, oh my gosh, and I stole that.
WWF had become ECW. The whole attitude thing, the whole shoot promos thing, the whole edgy, even they changed their colors from red, white, and blue to red and black.
It survived because of ECW. And ECW is really the company that eliminated Vince McMahon's opposition. Now that sounds rather crazy, but it's true. Because if that product wouldn't have been introduced by all of us, well then it wouldn't have, it would have never been picked up by Vince McMahon, and WCW would have ran over the top of him.
I double booked myself, and I chose Japan over ECW. And like I said, when I did that, ECW ran once a month. I was making a living in Japan, where I was going, 2 weeks out of it every month. And sometimes for one day I get paid for a whole week. And that particular match, I was going for one day to get paid for a whole week. And he wanted me to wrestle for, in Philadelphia once, on these spot shows. To me, they were still spot shows. To me, it wasn't much of a decision. So I went.
And
but at that, I remember the impact on that. That pissed me off.
Yeah.
And then I was also flattered that I had that much impact that people would care that I chose one match over another. Right, well see, that's when that towel thing happened. I came in right after that as a return, because everybody was mad at ECW, the commission and everybody, so he brought me in to help smooth things over. Like brothers fight the worst, sort of. And I'm not saying we're brothers, but we knew each other pretty close. And he had what I wanted, and I had what he wanted, We both wanted something from each other. So, but we didn't, neither one of us wanted to give. I guess, I don't know what to deal with, but I like him. I've never not liked him,
I'm gonna start doing something that they ain't gonna even remember to finish. I'm just gonna do something. He said, what? I said, follow me on this. So I started diving. Every chance I get, I dive. Then it became, are you gonna dive? We need you to dive. And once I knew it was a need, then it became a handicap. Then I ain't wanna do it no more. Then they started making a deal with me. Well, we'll pay you to do it. What you gonna dive off now? I ain't diving off shit. Then they get mad about it. Why? How you take your ass up there and dive off of it? That's 30 feet. That hurt. And when it's time to go, Vic says, Jack, I can't do it. I said, Vic, we're on pay-per-view, let's go. He said, I can't do it, Jack, I'm scared, it's too high. And we having this conversation 20 feet above the floor. I said, Vic, on 3, 1, 2, 3, and I pulled him, he pulled back. I pulled him down on top of me, and I hit that first table, and he did his flip, and he caught up with me. And his back ended up against my head, and it slammed my head against the floor, and it cracked my skull, and I had brain fluid coming out my nose and my ears.
New Jack and Vic Grimes fell 25 feet. They aren't stuntmen. On concrete. It should have killed them. And what would happen if they would have died? They'd have moved them over and kept going. To me, 2 guys almost die. That's a big deal. And it's not a big deal to the fan because they're so MTV minded. They're going to say, what's next? Unless you slow things down to let them understand the gravity of what they just saw.
I got nerve damage in my right eye. And I can't see out of my right eye right now.
and I would never be able to see out of my red eye again in my life. And I have short-term, my memory is about 2 or 3 days old. And I get headaches. And sometimes my eyes get like bloodshot like they are now, for no reason. Then I go 3 or 4 days and I don't sleep. Hey, but that's part of New Jack being New Jack.
And I just think ECW kind of blew by a lot of huge moments like that. But that was their niche, and they did something right. I'm an old fart, and I would have done a little different.
We found out the email address for the president of Request TV. His name was Hugh Panero. And we put that email address up, and literally he got overwhelmed with email. And I guess he figured that if that many people were that passionate about it and that interested in seeing it, that he'd give it a shot. And that's a big part of the reason that Barely Legal got off the ground.
Here's the part that I don't know if a lot of people remember this or if they want to remember this. It's the fact that the locker room completely fell apart before the first pay-per-view.
The entire poster was Taz and Sabu and none of us. No one else. And I'm like, I mean, that was a hot angle, but honestly, I don't think it was as hot as ours.
Other groups really, other than WWF and WCW, weren't getting onto pay-per-view. So this broke ground.
Because you got to remember, we were only syndicated television. We didn't have a national TV deal.
It was. The whole night was magical from start to end, Paulie and his speech, it was wonderful. He did a great job that night, too.
Everything was just a little bit different that day. You could tell by certain guys that weren't pacers at all, guys that were pacing back and forth, totally nervous.
I was going to be the first announcer ever to call a wrestling pay-per-view by himself. No color commentators, and it had never been done before.
The WWE was pretty instrumental with helping us with the very first pay-per-view as well, as far as using the special lighting company and stuff like that.
For anybody that was involved as a performer from that time, if they tell you they weren't excited as hell that night, they're lying to you, because I was, and I'd been to a lot of pay-per-views before that.
They were ready, though. They were ready. They were prepared, and the excitement was there on Barely Legal. It was wonderful.
Terry ain't nervous. I know Stevie Richards was goddamn nervous about that match, you know what I mean? But I don't know, maybe I was too drunk to be nervous or whatever, but I don't know. But everybody was a little bit tight, yeah.
Can't beat that one, boy. That's a hell of a match. Holy crap, did you see that?
I just remember going to Terry, I said, Terry, we are going to steal this show. And he looks at me, he's well, goddamn saying, let's go out there and just do that.
Actually watch the tape of Barely Legal. You'll see me, the only time you see me on camera, during the last match, I am running around ringside like a rabbit without its head. We're going, home, go home, it's time, bring it home. We're off the air in 3 minutes, 2 minutes, I'm trying to get these guys' attention.
We had like 10 seconds till black. 10, 9, 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4, hand raise, 3, 2, 1, and we're off, I mean, it was right down, just right on the money.
We're off the air. 2 minutes later, the generator blows, and everybody just looked at each other, and we were all like almost in tears. It was just one big group hug, one love fest. That night was like, we were the little engine that could, we did it.
To this day, I will put that performance up against any other wrestling announcer that has ever called any wrestling event. And I'm not saying I'm better than everybody else, but I think, especially on that night, I was as good as anybody else there has been.
The high that everybody felt because everything went off and it went off great, and that it was like, all right, we're there, we're doing pay-per-view, we made it.
I remember being in tears. I remember being absolutely in tears, and it's the first time in my life that I had ever cried out of happiness. I don't know that I've cried out of happiness since.
Terry Funk embodies ECW. Everything that was good about ECW was Terry Funk.
I don't think I've met anyone who has a bigger passion for the business.
That's not fair. He's a great guy. He's a super great guy. Good friend of my family and good friend of mine.
A lot of respect there between you two.
Yeah, super amount.
The guy's been there, done it all, still doing it, and I have all the respect in the world for that guy. He's amazing, absolutely amazing.
I'm glad you asked me about Terry Funk.
Funk would just sit there and you'd go to the ring, and afterwards you'd have to decipher it yourself. Okay, tonight he kept throwing me out of the ring for some reason. Okay. So it was a very different way of teaching.
Hardcore fans absolutely adored Terry Funk because of him giving his body to them.
Terry was way ahead of his time, and he stayed about 10 years ahead of the curve his whole career. And at 60-something, with knees that shouldn't work at all and a back that is completely wrecked, but an iron will, he still goes out and entertains as good as anybody.
He went to ECW, and he didn't come there just to make himself a star. He came to put other people over. And how many legends put people over? I mean, most guys, you know, they want to be the top guy till the day they drop, and Terry never cared about that. Terry, he was always good for business.
Crazy. That can't be an act. That can't be an act. It's either the greatest work in the business, or that man is a little nuts.
Terry Funk, I wouldn't have sex with him, but I love him to death. You know what I mean, he's been around his business since 1902. And Terry Funk paved the way for a lot of guys in this business right now. And I respect him to the utmost.
The reason why he started moonsaulting. He's getting late on in his career. What the hell can I do, kid, to really make these people pop that they ain't seen already? God damn it, I'm gonna moonsault. I just looked at him like that. He's like, what, you don't think I can? I said, Terry, you are God. You can, what am I gonna tell Terry Funk now? You can't moonsault. The guy would have beat the hell out of me right then.
I really admired John Ayers, and because he taught me what a leader really is, you know, I mean, kind of made me understand what a true leader is, and a true leader is a person to be followed. And I tried to do that whenever I was in ECWS, to be the type of individual that went out there and gave 100% and didn't bitch and didn't gripe and did the right thing for the company, and tried to do the right thing for the people that I was in the ring with too. And I think that I accomplished that, and I'm very proud of that. You think that I don't remember the most physical and brutal match that I was ever in professional wrestling was in a barbed wire match against Sabu, and we both had to be cut out of the barbed wire at the end. As far as giving to an audience, he got entangled in the wire, and it totally ripped his bicep from his elbow all the way up.
Fucked my bicep up.
And that's a good 10, 12 inches.
All I could see was the inside because it hit my vein. So it was so deep there was no blood. The blood was only coming out of my vein, so it was squirting out. So I was a little bit freaked out. Then I go, oh fuck, what am I gonna do? And I looked at Fonzie, and Fonzie goes, what are you gonna do? And I said, give me some tape. He goes, I don't have any. I said, please, Fonzie, work with me. I know he doesn't have no tape, but find some.
And I had a good inch gap all the way up there, you know, and it was just something that you don't continue with.
Ever any doubt in your mind that you should just stop the match?
No. I knew it wasn't like a missing limb or something. It wasn't that bad.
You knew it wasn't a missing limb.
Right, it was still attached. All my bones and tendons were attached.
And he took that roll of tape and taped up his arm and said, let's go on.
And after that, the whole match that we had was thrown out. Not that we had that much put together anyways, but what little guidelines we had, it was thrown out. It was just survival.
They could have lost me at one part of that night as I went out of the ring and through the wire and got entangled in it, and it got entwined around my neck, and I was about to pass out whenever they went ahead and got it cut off.
Yeah, we got tangled in the barbed wire and I got stuck around his throat. Because every time we moved, we'd hurt each other. Right. That was more uncomfortable than getting sliced, was being in that ball, you know.
I've never seen anything like what he did that night.
I brought in Public Enemy to the WWF, and I didn't know that they had turned down a contractual offer by Bruce Pritchard and somebody else a couple of years before that when they came to WCW. Well, they come up there and somebody buzzed Ron Simmons and Bradshaw and said beat them up to see how they react. And I told Public Enemy, I said, this is coming. You don't say anything. And if you don't think that I felt horrible sending two people that I tried to offer an opportunity to the, as a representative of the WWF, and then to tell them to take this beating to show that they are part of the team, to only get fired a week later, I'm ashamed of myself, and I'm ashamed at that time of the business that I was in, because those guys, I've been told by Vince McMahon 100 times, I don't offer guarantees, I offer opportunity. Everybody has an opportunity to excel here. Public Enemy didn't have a chance to excel. They were humiliated and fired.
It's just one phone call. And out of one phone call, this urban myth was born that there was a mole in the company and everybody's going to raid the company and bring the company down. As Paul and I got to talk more and more about it, we started realizing, wow, when the boys bite, the fans are going to bite.
People are like, oh, there's a mole in the locker room, but I never heard that talk.
Todd Gordon calls and has this big plan. He calls up and he goes, it was an invasion angle like the NWO that had started to wind down. And he goes, I can bring you this number of ECW talent and we can do an invasion. And these guys were all working for ECW at the time. And I said, you clear that with Paul E and we'll talk. I said, if I hear Paul E tell me and go down the list of everybody you have, then we'll talk. And he goes, I can't do that. This is a deal where we're going to take this group of people and come down there. And I said, we're going to be upfront about it, or we're not going to do it.
There's one performer go up to Paul and say, I was part of that group supposed to be jumping to WCW, and they offered me $300,000 a year. Well, Paul knew there was no group jumping, so this guy's making a fool out of himself.
Todd and Paulie were partners at that point. I don't think the mole thing never could have really materialized.
But yet the legend of this mole story grew and grew and grew, and we just sat back and we just laughed.
The only time I was really bothered by somebody jumping from ECW was the time Stevie left ECW for WCW, because there had been no notice of it.
Because I really didn't want to leave, but I also knew that influentially, we were no longer going to be an influence on the business like we were. And we weren't again.
The whole "you sold out" thing chanted by fans. Yeah, well they did, fine. So you're supposed to work for the most money you can get.
Bischoff and Vince would every once in a while try pulling a talent raid. Paulie had no choice but to lock guys in under a contract with some decent money, but the money wasn't there that we needed.
Maybe at one point, technically, we're all being overpaid, because you got guys. I was making like $175,000 a year. I know Van Dam was making that, Sabu was making that, Shane was making that, Raven was making that. You know what I mean? So we were making just there was 4 or 5 guys that were making close to $1 million.
I've been pointed out as a lot of times that I was the one that took talent away from ECW, and that's not the case. I never took anybody or even presented anybody to WCW or Eric Bischoff that didn't call first.
Rob Van Dam, went from a guy that I'd seen, working job matches in WCW not very long before to one of the top guys in ECW very, very quickly.
Rob was like the last great ECW attraction.
Physical attributes, maybe the most talented in the business.
I always respected his athleticism, but working, we had 2 entirely different opinions on work. I believed in storytelling, and he believed in a bunch of high spots.
He was cool, he was cocky, and he had great matches, and the fans took to him.
I think New York missed a boat on him. Like when we were doing that Alliance angle, which was horrifying, he was so over it. They would put him and Austin together, nothing but money. But they wouldn't pull the trigger on it.
Rob was cool, man. I never had any problem with Rob.
Some of those matches took years off my life. We knew we had something special between us, a good special chemistry, and he's one of the most gifted athletes in the business, and every time we tried to just top ourselves and pull out something that people hadn't seen in wrestling before.
Jerry was a traditional worker who was able to adapt his traditional wrestling style and become hardcore.
It's sad that certain people think that, it's so devastating to their career if they lose one match or something. But I think I'm proof that it really doesn't matter. I think I've lost the majority of my career, but I think the fans still like to see me wrestle.
Initially, we thought TNN was gonna be our savior. At least I did, because I was like, okay, it's national television.
I didn't know at first what was going on. Everything seemed to be so, perfect, and And next thing I know, just hearing through the grapevine how they're screwing us over,
I think that the TNN deal, probably wasn't as good as it could have been. They probably, didn't make as good a deal as they could have. But again, they were desperate to get a TV spot, and they took what they could get.
I thought this was going to be it. It was going to be great. We were taking the next step until I got to the first taping, and I knew we were done.
They had to raise their production value so that they would present a show that could air on a network.
It wasn't good. It didn't come off as a good show. The building was half empty. The building was too light. It did, we didn't have enough black curtain. It didn't look good.
Compared to the Monday Night Wars, it looked horrible. It didn't look good. That grittiness did not translate well to a national audience.
So instead, he put together like the best of ECW, which the network crapped on. I saw the facts that came in from that.
We were paying them. You know what I mean? That's where all the company's money was going. They weren't paying us to be on that program.
We basically were guinea pigs to see how wrestling would do on their network, and we ended up being their #1 show. And they turn around and offer Vince $110 million to come on instead of us, and dumped us.
There was no promotion for our company.
Well, they were at that first show. Would you? The first show. And what did they see? A half-empty building in Toledo, Ohio, where we had a production truck sitting outside, a full production truck that we refused to use, and we did a 2-camera shoot.
The Dudleys were the tag champs. Taz was the world champion. They were gone within the first month of the company being on national TV.
It was bigger exposure, but at that point, I knew the ship was sinking anyway. It was a matter of time.
You know what? And I'll say this bluntly, and he can read. If you're not good enough to script the show ahead of time like a pay-per-view, the way it's going to air on television, but just taping a bunch of matches in haphazard order and then cutting them together to make hours of TV, the business wasn't doing that anymore. So we weren't ready to take that step.
When Mike Awesome tried to jump to WCW, at the time Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo had just returned to power, and they were going to debut the new WCW, and they wanted to really have a really big show with a big surprise, which turned out to be Mike Awesome, who through the grapevine wanted to sign a contract with us and come to WCW.
Paul was ringing my phone off the hook because I was at Nitro, and he was asking me, "Is he there yet? Is he there yet?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he's here."
He eventually did end up on Nitro.
Yeah, Mike did make his appearance. Then they arranged something, I believe, where Mike was going to do one more appearance for ECW to drop the belt. I think Taz came in and beat him, and that's how they got out of it.
I mean, it was a big ordeal. They had like security, and he had to come in through the back door and couldn't come down the aisle. He had to get right in the ring, lose the belt, get right back out, right on the plane. It's kind of ridiculous, but from what I understand, the Bischoff was trying to talk him into dumping the belt on TV, but thank God he didn't do that. It's kind of heartbreaking, I'm losing a friend, probably won't see him for a good long time, and plus knowing that he didn't do the right thing,
Everything that they did that was original was already stolen. And really since then, there hasn't been a whole lot of original stuff since, because coming up with original stuff is hard, So, it wasn't that unique a product anymore.
One thing that really got everyone was, we were still showing up, busting our asses, bleeding, breaking bones, you name it, and sometimes the paycheck wouldn't be there.
Yeah, the money for the travel started getting difficult to collect. One week he had to go collect it out of the merchandise stand to pay, and
paychecks started bouncing and money started getting lost, and the pay-per-view company was not paying us on time, and we go to Canada to do a show, and all of a sudden we coming back and the money got seized at the border because they said it was illegal drug money. It is bullshit, and he just started fucking everybody on their pay.
Things started changing when the paycheck stopped coming regularly, you know what I mean?
They needed a synergy, and there was no corporate synergy there. And little by little, it killed them. It was like cancer.
After every show, we would just sit there, and Paul would give us this speech, we're going to get a TV deal, and I'm going to California, I'm doing this, and this. In my heart, I so wanted, I wanted to believe him, but something told me, I'm not sure if this is going to go down.
Paulie was out in LA having meetings with, TV executives for all these networks, and when in all reality he was out there getting an extra payday shooting rollerball. And so when everyone found that out, what's that do for morale?
I had 10 checks bounced, but he made good on all 10 checks. and he paid my bounce fees. So that, you know, I have no problem with that. It got to a point later where the checks just didn't come.
You know, he would come to you and you say, I'm not taking a dime out of this company. You'll make money out of this company before I do. You know, he probably said that to a lot of people.
Of course, Paul knew it was. Well, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Tell the locker room that?
Paul Heyman really looked burned out at that point. Looked pale, looked tired. He wasn't coming to a lot of the shows.
When you handle everything without help, the human body and the human mind can only do so much, and then it starts to short circuit.
I mean, you know, we worked for free. How much more can you do?
But we were all unified against Paul at that point, so we were still, the locker room was unified, but unified for a different reason.
Somebody said to me, if you want any merchandise, you should go to the table and get it tonight, because you're not going to be back. This is it. And it was said to me very privately. And I remember saying, do the wrestlers know? And the person's like, no.
I don't know if it was the following Monday, but it was relatively close. 9 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was Tommy. And he said, I just want to let you know, Paulie's going to be on Raw tonight. And my heart dropped. And I was just like, what? Because, you know, we were still being told we were having a pay-per-view in March. And he had, you know, signed his deal with Vince, and we were never told.
And then whenever you see him walking out on Raw, that's when you're like, well, I guess that deal just fell through because I don't think he would be working for them if he's trying to run another company, you know. So, yeah, really sunk in about that time.
ECW fans will be able to say, that's the way I wish it was. I saw that when I was a kid, and that's how I wish it was now. It was that good.
It'll always be something that'll be really missed because it was something special.
It's the greatest drug I ever took.
Every broken bone, every torn muscle, every trip to the chiropractor, it was worth every bit of it.
The product was something that connected with an audience that loved what they were watching, but they just didn't have the money to continue to wait it out. And you know, that's one of the ironic things is that now that the WWE has control of that film library, they've made a fortune, made a ton of money on the ECW DVDs, and I'm sure more are going to be coming, and their pay-per-view is going to be a success. But you know, they have the money. WWE has the money to support it, whereas Paul and the people involved at the time didn't, and because of that, there was just no chance of success.
I had an opportunity to go into the WWE at this time, and they sent me a contract, and sent me a very good contract. And this is the contract here, and it's not that it's anything special or anything, but it's for quite a sum of money, and it certainly isn't for what Hulk Hogan or Triple H or Ric Flair or The Undertaker makes, but it was for quite a bit more money than for this group that I'm going to perform for. And I had a choice, and I had to make a choice between the two companies because I know at my age and my time, again, is that I can't perform two shows that close together. So, did I want to go for the man that that did a lot to destroy the company? Did I want to go for the fellow that made millions of dollars with the rise and fall of ECW that had nothing to do with it? Do I want to go for the man that is going to have an ECW show that could give a damn about ECW? Did I want to go to a show that he's going to have fans that are simulating ECW fans? No, I wanted to go to an ECW show. I wanted to go to a show where it's an extension of the guys' personalities and not a Vince McMahon's group or whatever it is. So I chose to go back and enter into the ring into the three-way dance, and that took a lot of thought on my part. I talked to it about my wife, with my wife, and she says, "Honey, at your age, 60 years old, you ought to be looking at the Bucks, and you better be up there at the Vince McMahon show." And I said, "Honey," I said, I said, "Honey, I can't do it." I want to go back to the guys that I love, and the guys that I have been down the road with, and that's why I'm not a millionaire. Because I've done the things that I've wanted to do instead of the things that I probably should have done.
During the making of this documentary, we lost a very good friend. We lost a guy who gave everything he had to the wrestling business, and well, words can't describe it. I guess I can't really even describe what he meant to all of us. And that's Chris Candido. And Chris was very excited about the documentary. I had consulted with him about it, and he had given me suggestions, and we had talked about his involvement and what he was going to do on the documentary and the questions we were going to talk about and the different things. And unfortunately, obviously, Chris passed on. I talked to several people about it, Shane and several people involved in this project, and how we could best pay tribute to Chris. And while Chris won't be on the documentary in terms of how everyone else has appeared, we did come across a tape just right after he died, and it was a tape that we shot about 2 weeks before he passed on. And it was backstage. Shane Douglas had actually been busy all day, so we needed somebody to fill in with me for co-hosting Explosion, and I always kind of wanted to work with Chris, and he was there, and he was in the middle of this crazy gimmick where he was beat up by Kevin Nash and came out in a completely ridiculous wheelchair and the neck brace. It was just, you could see the Bobby Heenan influence on the whole thing. So Chris stepped right in, and we had a great time, man. I'll tell you what, this was one of the most fun times I've ever had in wrestling. And rather than appear on the documentary, I thought we could just include this as a gift from Chris, because everybody who's seen it can classify it no other way. This is Chris in his element. This is Chris doing what he loved, and I know it's probably been said elsewhere, but the last couple months of his life, boy, he really got everything together, and he was on track. He was tan, he was built, he was having the time of his life again in wrestling, and to lose him anyway, I hope you enjoy it. This is nothing more than a gift, I think, from him. This is uncut Chris Candido in his true element. Hello, wrestling fans. It's JB, Jeremy Borash, and welcome to another edition of TNA Explosion. And we are... What is it?
How are you?
Chris,
the co-host of the show here. As you see, a little hurt. I ruptured my sternum here, and I fractured my C6 cervical vertebrae in my arm. I'm coming down with a bad case. I think it's a harditis. I'm sick.
I want to see what's...
Ow!
Sorry, I didn't mean to do...
What's wrong with you?
I didn't mean to do that. Are you sure you're okay to host the show?
Will you stop pushing my shoulders so hard? I'm a trooper. Yeah, I'm here to help you.
Do you think you can really tell the fans about lockdown?
You just what we talked about again? I forgot. Oh, that's right. Okay, I thought. See, I
Need some gauze. This is tremendous.
Yeah.
I'd be like, are you okay under there?
Ah!
I would rip that off, okay?
No, don't touch me.
Hey, wait a minute, there's no abrasion there. Or should I say, wait a minute, Chris, there's no cut there. You look like you're healed.
It was a preventive measure.
Just say it's internal bleeding.
Yeah, make it. Why am I actually sitting like I'm fucking hurt? What the hell?
You're in a character, that's all. Nurse.
Whoa,
that better?
I'm going backwards now. I seem to have re-injured myself.
Well, your arm seemed just fine in the last segment.
No, I heard it again. The AMW guys are very big. I hit him, and
you re-broke it when you hit him over the head with it.
My medulla oblongata is killing me.
And then suddenly you got an abrasion on your other side. You should really...
The pain travels.
Total
JB,
nonstop.
JB, could you get me a blanket? I'm getting the
You want a
cold
blanket?
sweat. I'm getting cold sweats. I'm not feeling. Look at me. I'm sick. Please get me a.
There we go. There's a blanket.
That's a
Gang, we'll
burlap
see you
sack.
at Lockdown exclusively on pay-per-view.
Ah!
Get him some help, will you?
Don't leave. Why y'all packing up now? Sit down. Sit down. Roll the credits.
He used to back me up into the turnbuckle and he'd fart. Which made for great television because some of my facials were from Shane Douglas farting on me.
I'm on my knees in the ring, and he's got me, and he wanted me to yell, "Mommy."
God, I hate living in Atlanta. If we give the United States an enema, I want to stick it right here.
Celine Dion has a scar like I do.
You enjoyed that gum, Terry?
So if you hold the ropes open for me, I can't hump.
I mean, not like my mom, I'm not really sure, but I just remember getting on the ring and I'm yelling and I'm doing, "Mommy, mommy, mommy."
Which all the girls do it these days.
Yeah,
but I did it first. I did it first.
You were the first to hump
In
the
the
rope.
promos and stuff, she always knew how to handle that kendo stick.
You know?
My nephews fart on me all the time. They cup it and throw it in my face. They do that, you know.
I was wondering. Yeah.
Or this. I don't know why you guys get off on that. Or the Dutch oven where you put the blanket in.
That's one of my personal favorites.
See, I don't get it.
Just please get me out of here. I'm begging you, Bill. Bill, if you have any pull. Bill, if you have anything for me to do in the Northeast, get me out of here. Bill, get me out of Atlanta. Bill, I'm begging you, Bill.
I'm yelling and I'm doing, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and I got back and Paul's like, "What the fuck were you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. Is that what you wanted?" He goes, "No, that's not what I wanted."
The Dudleys used to always say, "Francine loves farts." But I will tell you, I pop for the sound, but not the smell.
You'll see that. Wait a minute, you'll see that. Yeah, right.
Sexual chocolate. Damn it. That boy's good.
Yeah.
That's Jim Nyquart going.
Nix that part of this interview. Thank God you can nix this.
But enough
Farts are fun.
about farts.
Farts are fun.
This is
You're right.
This is gonna be 20 minutes about farts, but.
Back at you.